I'm in that mode where I've got to say what's on my mind and what's within me once again. In recent news, the newspapers have been in the news in that two major newspapers, the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, have both said that they would not endorse a presidential candidate for this year's election. It just so happens that both newspapers were prepared, the editorial boards, which are basically separate of the main news staff, they kind of off to a world to their own in the newsroom. They had they had drafted up their editorial indicating that they would be endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. And usually the process is that when they do something like that, something that's highly visible, then the head of the editorial board goes to the ownership of that publication and let them know what's going on. Well, the ownership of both publications said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to endorse anybody, no one at all. And the fallout from that is that they feel as if the ownership of these two publications are taking the route of cowardice. They would rather not deal with the potential wrath of the other presidential candidate, Donald Trump, because he's been on record very consistently and very vociferously about his enemies list that also includes media. He's talked of revoking the license of CBS. He's talked of how media, certain factions of media, is considered the enemy of the state, the enemy within. Okay. Now, you may not want to have anything to do with what I got to say because some of you already have a cooked in opinion of media. You feel that media as a whole is inaccurate, it's false, it's misleading, and in some ways you're right. But it depends on the source. You always have to consider the source. But then again, because of the plethora of media, of the plethora of options of where you get your information, it's to a point now where um, you may choose to listen to this source, this source, this source, and this source. Personally, I have my preferences, but I try to look at things from the eyes of having been in media, in which I have shared on many occasions. My formal background is that of a newspaper reporter. I'm from an era where the emphasis was on objectivity. There, if you wanted to be subjective, where you interjected your opinion, that is where your columns are for. That is where your editorials are for. And basically, if you wanted to keep a job, that's what you did. Those were the norms of when I was in school and when I was in media from the late 1980s until the year 2000. Now, the reason why I'm really, the reason why I'm making this upload, the reason why I'm documenting this here on YouTube is because this has a far-reaching effect. The fact that these newspapers are doing it basically out of concern or out of being, as some have described, as a preemptive move against the potential wrath of a political candidate. That tells me that there's cowardice in the media, something that I'd already known for about the last 25 years because I experienced it personally. But if you want to know cowardice in media, think back to 2016. Former ESPN talent Jemele Hill was basically ran out on the rail because of her tweeting her opinion of Donald Trump being a racist. Because he was just elected and there was some semblance of a sense of good feeling or goodwill about him. I guess folk were trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. Well, because of him lashing out the way he did, and then his acolytes lashing out the way they did because of the negative reaction to what she said of him being a racist, ESPN bowed to that pressure and offered up Jemele Hill's head to the crowd. Eventually, what were the things that happened? She was suspended. because she did something that they felt that was not within the bounds of her being an employee of ESPN. And um, eventually she was bought out of her contract. Now she's been very quiet about it because I guess there's a non-disclosure agreement behind it. Well, now it's taken her almost 8 years to uh, resurface into a prominent role of media, in which there's a deal that she just recently announced that she'll be doing. If memory serves me correct, I believe it's on Netflix that she's doing it. But correct me if I'm wrong. Comment in the section below. That's a very visible example. But I mentioned myself 25 years ago, and this was on a much smaller scale. And I'm gonna share why. Again, I'm gonna share why that this is important, and the why this is important to understand how this is going to affect you. That's really what it's about. Bottom line is that if it happens at this level, Washington Post, I mentioned about Jamel Hill at the ESPN level, and I'm about to share myself at an unknown, basically small newspaper in South Carolina from 25 years ago. If this stuff happened at those levels, and that's involving media, it can happen to you on YouTube. It can happen to you in just public discourse. So, what I mean by my personal experience and how media rolled on me. 1999, um, I wrote a column that pissed off at least half of the newspaper's readership. And that I wrote a column that really just that just blasted South Carolina's athletic program, namely its football program. I said that they were so bad that they should go Division 3, and they were at the time they were actually college football's Division 1A worst program. They had gone, they had actually gone, when it was all said and done, they had gone 1-21 over the course of 2 seasons, 1998 and 1999. But what I wrote was in the spring of 1999. Lou Holtz was now on his barnstorming tour of the Gamecock Club stops across South Carolina and the region. And so they're thinking, because Lou Holtz is there, oh, it's going to turn around. It never did, though. They went 1-10 the previous year, and he went 0-11 the next year. That's right. So my talking about them the way I did it was actually accurate. It was fair. It was true. But the problem was that the response, the backlash was so intense and so fervent over the next several days. In fact, the paper nudged on me, leaned on me to write a follow-up column, of which I did not apologize for what I wrote. I explained why I wrote it, but then that was what I wrote. What appeared in the newspaper was something else, and it was not reflective of my voice. It basically had me apologizing. So when I saw what I saw, when I saw what I saw the next day, I told them that I would no longer write any columns for this newspaper. Mind you, that prior to my writing columns, and I'd only been writing columns for that paper for a couple of months though, but I was there for 7 years, from 1993 to February 1993 to February 2000. They had asked me for years to write columns. And when they took away my voice the way they did, I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with columns. Okay. Now, here's how it affects you. Here's how it affects you with moves like what the Washington Post and New York Times, Los Angeles Times did. If they are concerned that they may be placed on Trump's enemy list if he is to be elected, what does not say that there might be people monitoring. We talk about how YouTube monitors the content and basically has its own censors for a certain type of material and all, and certain content is actually deleted out. What's not to say that if YouTube or Google, which is the parent company, is concerned about how Trump may react to them, they step up their censoring, their monitoring of content. Any content that is of a negative opinion of Trump, that they may cut off your channel altogether. Is one thing that people do put in false claims of offensive content. And if you get enough of that, that can actually the first they'll remove the monetization of the content. Then next, ultimately they could just shut down your channel. And if you have a channel that's really generating money, now all of a sudden you're not making any money. That's one example. But then there may be this panel of people who are monitoring YouTube content, or there's an algorithm that's set up monitoring YouTube content about your displeasure, your disappointment, your anger, your vitriol towards Trump, and it's reported in a criminal sense. Now all of a sudden you got people knocking on your door asking for you. This can happen. This can happen. I know I've talked for several minutes now, at least 10 minutes, but this can happen. And so what do? Do you continue to speak truth to power? Do you continue to speak truth against lies and disinformation? Or do you cower to the potential pressures and potential issues? This is what happens in other countries. This is what has happened in other countries, how people are sought out and killed for that very reason. Now, I'm going to give you one last example before I wrap up this particular segment of the Geezer. And by the way, if you like the content that's been provided in this segment or in any other segment, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. Now, this is long before all this type of discourse, and this goes back to my days as a reporter. Number one, the reason why people are pissed off with what is reported in media, depending on what it is, if it's something that really exposes something that is egregious, some pattern of behavior, some type of scheme that is extremely egregious and that is hurtful to the public at large, to society at large. When something like that comes out, and it's actually truthful, because they'll try to threaten to sue you for libel if you write it, if you say it, it's slander. You tend to know if you really wrote the truth by the degree of the intensity of people lashing out against you. Because what it is what's happening is that you have just put out something that they didn't want people to know about. And that is why I pissed off a lot of South Carolina fans, even though it was a column. But I had other stuff that I'd put out as a reporter. One story that I can think of that actually earned me national honors. A couple of stories that I can think of. Now, there was one, for example, about a junior college in Spartanburg where I worked at. The school president had fired the basketball coach because he refused to recruit athletes that was reflective of the school's racial makeup. And at the time, the school's racial makeup was 70% white, 20% black, and then the rest. So basically, he felt that the team should be 70% white instead of basically 95% black, because at the time there were 15 members on the team, 14 of them were black. Because now, when I found out about all this, I got to calling around, knocking on some doors, shaking the leaves. Very few people were willing to talk on the record. And this is a natural reaction that people have. They would rather stay out of something that's controversial than rather standing up and speaking out against something that they know is wrong and they know is controversial. There were people who were afraid of reprisal from the school. And I had people long after that story came out come up to tell me what you reported was right, but I just couldn't talk about it. When I did a story on Clemson's booster club, their IPTAY club, I paid $20 a year. That's what IPTAY means. I wrote about how, at the time, Clemson's booster club, IPTAY, which generated into the $10 million range of donations at the time to 1998 for all its members. They acknowledged they had less than maybe 25 of those members were black. But yet the football program, which is the big revenue stream for the athletic program back in 1998 and even now 2024, more than 75% of the kids that participate on the football team were black. Well, needless to say, that story pissed off a lot of Clemson fans. And that I got railed for the next month. In fact, when I left the newspaper, among other, there were the Clemson fans who cheered my departure and the South Carolina fans who cheered my departure. But what I'm getting at, the reason why people were pissed off is because I wrote about something that they didn't want people to know about, or they were ashamed of what people would know about. And that is the same thing that's happening now, even in media now. I'll give you the example. You've got the 4-star generals, Mark Milley, James Mattis, John Kelly, who've all said how they, in their observation, in their experience, Donald Trump has fascist tendencies and he is fascist to his core. And these have come out, and all this has come out in published material. And you've got Trump himself reacting to it, calling it a bunch of lies and all. And he's got his acolytes and worshipers all railing against it. He's denying that he said it. He's also saying that Kelly is a loser and a washed up general and all. But that is whenever he's reacted to things like that, it's because it's true. Go back in his history. Go back in his history. That's how he's reacted. But I'm not trying to sway your opinion on this election, who you're going to vote for, but I do want to sway your opinion on what you see with media reacting the way it is. When I mentioned about my experience with the newspaper, the reason why the paper rolled on me the way they did is because I think people started threatening to not advertise with the paper. And because of that, they're looking at their pocketbook rather than somebody like me make an opinion. It wasn't an opinion. It was a column that pissed off some people. They would rather silence me than to not lose the money that's coming in. But but supposedly media is one of the roles of media is to inform and educate. It is to inform people of its role is to inform people of what is around them. Its role is to educate people to what is around them. And in some way, depending on how creative the person is, it may entertain them. But if that voice is then silenced, how then do you learn? How then are you informed? And I'll leave it at that. If you like the content that's been provided in this segment of the Gig Geezer and any other segment of Gig Geezer, hit that subscribe button. Give my content a thumbs up. Share my content among others, and I definitely welcome comments in the section below. I'm Inwood Lane. As always, may your grind and may your hustle continue.